Can you, oh, okay, here we are. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting the oil and gas panel straight away. Will be very interesting. I'm sure that please stay with us, don't go. And I'll quickly introduce, I mean, everybody's running out of time and we're starting later than expected. So we will try to do everything in 40 minutes. We'll have our keynote speaker, as you know, is Mr. Andriy Kobolev, CEO of Naftogaz. He will start with the short presentation and a couple questions, and then unfortunately he has, because of this time shift, he has to go, but then we will stay with the other very interesting speakers. We actually have an extremely representative panel here, who basically is the most active people in the oil field industry in Ukraine, so you definitely would be, if you're interested in the industry, these are the people. So so first of all, let me do the introduction. So Andriy Kobolev, who you already know, CEO of Naftogaz. He's an international relationship graduate, and he's been working in PwC before, and also he's a veteran of Naftogaz of Ukraine. CEO, very successful in this position. As you know, basically success of Naftogaz is one of the most biggest successes of the Ukraine as a whole and Ukrainian reform. Mr. Olga Bielkova, who is also international relationship graduate from Harvard Kennedy School. She is one of the most active members of parliament in Ukraine, very active, very well-known person, and also very successful in what she does. Obviously, we will be interested to hear from her progress. Viktor Gladun is CEO of one of the, actually the first international investor in the Ukrainian oil market. I still remember visited their office in 1997. It's a JKX, which is listed in London Stock Exchange, and PPC, which is its 100% subsidiary in Ukraine. Roman is the, yes, Viktor is also Harvard graduate. We have Harvard section here. He's a law, right? And he has also extensive international experience. Roman also graduated from the US Business School, and he is he basically united all independents of gas production. He's a chairman of the Association of the Gas Producers. So basically, he represents all other companies which is not here in the panel right now. And he can answer all your questions about how's their life, you know, away from the conference. And Alastair. Alastair is, again, he's one of the biggest investors in the oil sector and gas sector. Oxford graduate, for a change, and he is basically chairing the company, which is also one of the most active participants in the independent participants in the market. He has lots of information for you, lots of stories. So what we'll do short presentations of each, then we'll ask a couple questions of each, and then we'll have a free time, your questions, our questions, and so on. Andriy, please, floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for letting me speak first. I'd like to apologize to other participants that I'll have to leave earlier, but I have a fixed commitment which I can't move, unfortunately. I would like to start with a short presentation about one project which I believe can be of the most interest for international community in Ukraine, given its size, given its importance, and also given the progress that Ukraine Naftogaz has achieved so far. I'm talking specifically about unbundling. And just to remind you that Ukraine, as a member to European Energy Treaty, has obligation to unbundle its gas transmission system from vertically integrated undertaking, which Naftogaz currently is. However, in the plans of the government and of the political elite of the country, and those plans were confirmed recently by the law which was adopted by our parliament, is not only to simply unbundle, but also to engage international partner. And that partner, from our perspective, its engagement is one of the, or probably is the only and the major criteria for successful unbundling which we see in Naftogaz, because this partner is critical for us not only to maintain flow of gas through Ukraine from Russia to Europe, which I will speak about later, but also critical for developing proper, transparent and efficient gas market. Can we have the next slide, please?
Next slide, please.
Thank you. Just a brief description of what Ukrainian GTS looks like. 38,000 kilometers of pipelines. 18 European countries get their gas supply through our system. The system is heavily dependent, revenue-wise, on Russian transit. 88% of our revenues, let's say potential revenues, or revenues per European regulation, should be coming from transit of natural gas. And 50% of natural gas is currently, which is currently exported from Russia to the European Union, is sent through our system. You probably all heard about disputes that Naftogaz and Gazprom used to have. You probably heard about gas wars that were in the past. We pretty much hope that this should be over in the nearest future. We also expect that existing contract between Naftogaz and Gazprom will expire by the end of 2019. And we very much hope that the new contract between Gazprom and new independent operator will be signed based on European principles, based on understanding that transit will be kept through Ukrainian territory, and based on transparency and efficiency, which Ukraine has been always accused of lacking compared to other European countries. From Naftogaz perspective, what has been done so far, next slide please. Can I have the next slide? We've been developing a roadmap, which was not an easy process, with the help of many international partners. And I would like to express my deep gratitude also to people from EBRD, who played a very important role in developing first roadmap and who were helping us in designing a new roadmap and who are heavily supporting Naftogaz in this endeavor, as well as other international organizations and government of Ukraine. The roadmap was recently developed in the form which would allow, we believe, to achieve proper unbundling by the end of 2019. And when I'm saying proper unbundling, the first criteria is compliant. It should be compliant with certain energy package. It should be fully ready, and we should get conditional certification from European Commission, from Energy Community Secretariat. And as soon as contract expires and system is moved out from Naftogaz group, there should be final certification. And this final certification should allow Ukraine as a country to attract foreign investor to help co-manage our system. Next slide, please.
See, I control you.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, didn't know. Just a brief overview of what the proposal looks like. Firstly, we're talking about equity participation. Existing Ukrainian legislation allows up to 49% of share capital of the new operator to be sold to new partner. That number, again, is not cut in the stone, and we believe that when the issue will be brought to Ukrainian parliament, different numbers can be considered both ways. I would also like to stress that current valuation of transmission assets stands around $14 billion US, whereas current valuation of storage assets currently stands close to $5 billion US. Transmission system itself is profitable, whereas storage assets are of less attractiveness, and we believe that at the end of the process there will be two different companies, one managing transmission, one managing storage, so that we don't mix different businesses, allowing different types of investors to look at different attractiveness and different return ratios. Speaking of the next steps, our expectation is that by the end of this year, government of Ukraine will be able and will be willing to come up with proposal on how the final contest or final tender for selecting partner for Ukrainian GTS system will look like. We also expect that these criteria will be pre-approved in Ukrainian parliament, and as soon as that pre-approval will be granted, Ukraine will be able to launch a contest which should be finalized in the middle of 2019. Thank you for attention, and I believe that we also have 5 minutes for Q&A session.
Yes. So, very quickly, how do you think, how these partners will look like? Who do these, I mean, obviously not the names, but I mean, is this, what type of companies should be the partners?
The law clearly says that the partners should be either from European Union or from US or from Canada, and this partner should be compliant with certain energy package. So there should not be another vertically integrated entity which could enter Ukrainian market and would then make again us as a country non-compliant with our international obligations. Those are two requirements.
So you think there would be transportation companies or investment companies? Or
we are looking at both of them, at both types, but so far we've seen strong interest from European gas transmission companies, big names. Some of them are publicly known, some of them have not been announced yet, and currently we see interest from one big US player. That's what we have so far.
And you do direct negotiations like Naftogaz directly with this, so you use intermediaries, or how the process looks like?
The process was until recently run by the government. Now the process was suspended. We believe that the deficiency of previous process was very simple. There was no specific selection criteria. It's very difficult to talk to any potential partner unless you can communicate clearly what the selection criteria is. We hope this selection criteria, again, as I mentioned, can be pre-approved with the help of the Parliament in the nearest future, because otherwise, again, partners know that the final decision approving partnership is made by the Parliament, which makes perfect sense also to pre-approve criteria with the Parliament. Otherwise, you run the risk that you can do the contest and the Parliament would simply say, look, we believe criteria should be different. We should avoid this risk. So as soon as it's done, we can relaunch the contest and there will be new tender contest process in the nearest future.
Okay. And how do you think that improved the production in Ukraine? Independence, so would be any better access to the pipe from the production companies, or like, is it any effect at all on the production side?
So far, my assessment, and maybe my colleagues will have different opinion, is that in terms of access to the system, local production companies not have problems.
Okay.
The access is there, you can get it. It's more or less standard procedure. However, what this partner probably will be able to provide is to provide additional services also to producing entities. For example, gas purification. That's a big investment bid that some small producers are not capable of getting. Well, big names usually can buy this or invest in this easily. Small names, for them, sometimes that's an issue. So providing additional services in terms of preparing gas for entering the system, that's probably the only thing or the only room for improvement which I see. However, if you look at Ukrainian system and if you look at current calorific value of gas we have there, this room of improvement can be estimated per annum approximately from 300 to 500 million US dollars. That's the approximate amount of calories we are losing because that purification is not done properly.
Okay. I have last question and then we'll have one question from the audience. The question is obviously very broad, but could you answer very, very shortly? So, are we moving to energy independence as a country? When do you think we can actually see it, like, in which time horizon? Your estimation as a strategic player.
There is a plan which is called 2020. And I don't think I will surprise anyone if I say that from this perspective, this plan does not look realistic. UGV, our major production subsidiary, for the last couple of years was not given any new big greenfield. Tenders were simply suspended, and all our production increase comes from our old or existing fields, sometimes new horizons. We are currently trying to develop tight gas play, and we have some success there, which is small, but it's very promising. But we don't have access to new big areas. And we've seen recently new big greenfields giving outside proper and transparent tender process to small companies which, at least from visual impression, do not have capacity to develop those fields. If this practice is not stopped, I can't even predict when this independence can be reached. We all know what we're talking about. Then these private guys will go to London and will try to resell those licenses and those fields to big names who will not buy them, because they're not buying something which, at least again from visual perspective, has some signs of not really transparent process. Ukraine has to do its homework, and Ukraine has to be frank with ourselves. Until we fix tendering process, until we create stable legislation, stable taxation regime, we will not reach energy independence. As easy as that.
Okay, we'll get back to. Thank you very much. We'll get back to this question, obviously, with further. So let's ask one. Okay, so that lady over there, she was first to raise hand.
Is there a microphone? Okay, I'll try. Mariana Kozisova, turning point marker. Key question for you, because indeed Ukrainian gas fields are getting depleted. Shale gas is not feasible because of the political and other purposes, but there is a very good field of renewables, which right now enjoy some of the highest tariffs, not just in Europe but worldwide. And you can actually see a lot of oil and gas majors globally moving into the renewables field. Is there a reason of why Naftogaz should or should not move into the renewables as well, and this way help Ukraine's energy independence? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. One small adjustment to your question. There was an element of framing. Shale gas has a big perspective in Ukraine. I believe Ukraine can produce a lot from shale gas in an environmentally friendly and safe way. That's our assessment. Shale and tight. Speaking of renewables, Naftogaz is developing projects in renewable energy. We have launched several pretty small, I must say, solar stations around Ukrtransgaz GTS system. We have developed a list of potential projects which we are currently discussing with international investors. The beauty of our position is that because of the legacy fixed assets located all over Ukraine and most of them being connected to the grid, we already have connections. Again, we are currently here, and I met last week in Kyiv with people from London interested in these particular projects. So we are very serious about this. In our strategy, renewable energy has a big section, and it's a big investment direction which we plan to put money into in the nearest future.
Thank you very much, Andriy. Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you then. Okay, Olga, please, the floor is yours. Can you start with, you have a presentation? You don't have presentation.
No.
So,
Do you want me to start? Or do you
yeah,
want me to
please.
ask a particular question?
No, please start.
Okay.
You wanted to, you have a short introduction.
Yeah,
yourself. Please,
well,
go
we
ahead.
actually agreed that since I'm the only politician on this panel, I will offer you my honest observations in terms of political expectations, how politics and how politicians will frame, the issue of oil and gas in particular, in the nearest future. And let me start by a personal story. I'm second term in my parliament, and in my first term, I was dealing with a completely different issue, which was very innovative, promising e-commerce. And I was the only reason, and I was also in opposition. And, whenever I was invited, I would be, on a stage talking about potential of IT and, all of that. And it was very exciting for me to go and offer those comments. Except I realized at some point that no matter how I, advocate for IT in Ukraine, unless we solve the issue of gas in Ukraine, this is no good for me. The problem is so big, the gas for Ukraine is so big with all the geopolitical implications, with the transit position, with domestic dependence on gas. I mean, there is not another single point in public policy in Ukraine which is of so tremendous importance. But back 5 years ago, I would never accept an invitation to go and speak on such panel. I would be ashamed to sit next to CEO of Naftogaz then. I would be ashamed of some of the behaviors private companies were showing on the market. I would be ashamed of the policies. I would be ashamed of everything to do with this industry. So when I came to this parliament, I took that challenge, and I had a dream of changing image of this industry, putting in place some new regulations which would change the industry and kind of bring attention to this industry and explain to people in Ukraine, to politicians in Ukraine and investors abroad, the potential in this particular industry. And you will soon hear a lot of political speeches from our presidential candidates. each and every will talk about gas. Some will still promise you cheap gas. You know, that's business as usual in Ukraine, because voters will vote for those who promise that. But there is one change in Ukrainian politics which I want you to pay attention to. Every politician, even those who offer you cheap gas, they will say, we want increase of domestic produce of gas. And this is an achievement, you won't believe it, but this is a huge achievement for Ukrainian politics, because previously they were saying, I can make a good deal with Russia. I will bring you cheap gas from Russia. And from the very first day in my committee, and I'm deputy head of the energy committee, and I deal mainly with gas market, I had a plan which is not my plan. This is a common science if you read textbooks and oil and gas issues, and if you talk to industry, there are certain things which had to be fixed. For 3 years in a row, I was coming to London and promising I would do 4 things. And today, I'm very proud to be on this panel and to tell you that we've managed to accomplish everything I promised. This is as much as I can give you. So what did we do? We changed fiscal conditions. Something, this is like too good to believe in. Until I see 10 new companies coming to Ukraine, I'm gonna stuck with my idea of this is what had to be changed. We changed royalties. We have special rate for the new companies to come. It was extremely difficult to explain to my fellow politicians why do we have to do it, because I need to be in this room and I need to present Ukraine as a very attractive country in the region. You know, with the complexity of war and everything else, I need to get 10 more bids to the auctions from people like you. Second, we had some legacy issues with regulations and land reform not being like completed completely. We fixed that. We agreed with companies that if government is ready to make some, you know, goodwill steps towards companies, they should also open up the, you know, some data about how they pay royalties, who do they pay these royalties, if they cheat with royalties or not, how do they encourage local communities and stuff like this, so-called EITI standard, and we've managed to find a compromise with that. Least but not the last, we had an issue with local communities because, you know, usually the gas, you know, production, wonderful business for some jobs for some, but a little bit of destroyment for, you know, noise, whatever, roads, you know, for the local communities. And in our system, all the proceeds were going to the state, so we fixed that. We found a motivation for local communities to have their interests. Those were 4 issues we promised to fix at the level of parliament. Those were completed, but of course, if you ask me if I'm proud of the results, of the final result, not yet. We still have to work, and I'm here to get more ideas of what has to be done.
So what do you think should be done? I mean, what is your, let's put it this way, what is your like 2 priorities right now?
Okay, so my first priority is that never again politicians will come back to this mantra about cheap gas from Russia. And this is like, for me as a politician, even, you know, if achieving this change in philosophy, that was a huge accomplishment. Then we've talked, Andriy mentioned shale gas and all sorts of unconventional. Black Sea is of high priority for me as a politician to see being developed. With all due respect to renewables, just look at our numbers. Gas is like huge in you know, consumption by industry, by households, there is nothing to replace gas in the next 10-15 years. And we see outlook from you know, European agencies describing increase in demand in Europe and in Ukraine. It will be there. So we really need to work on more production of gas. This is no competition to renewables. So Black Sea, unconventional, new subsoil code, that's a dream for me to have a different way. And something realistic to be accomplished by the end of this term in Rada is change of change of the State Geological Service as an institution, the way it works with these companies. This is my minimal program, but I do hope colleagues will add.
Sounds like pretty aggressive for the the end of the term. But well, good luck with that. Okay, well, okay. So now we'll get back to the private sector. Viktor, you have a few minutes, obviously, and then we'll ask the question.
Thank you for introduction. Poltava Petroleum Company is well known in Ukraine as the first one. Joint venture, successful. First LPG plant, and I appreciate for the trust of EBRD. And by the way, B.C. Thompson was the lawyer who drafted the first loan to PPC in order to build. Right there. Thank you, sir. To draft that loan, and we get that facility, and we build the plant. So it's successful, LPG. We are the first one to trade the gas electronically, and we were the first one to put in place horizontal well with a multi frac on it, together with Schlumberger. If we are going forward, I just want to show our trend. I just want to mention that PPC, Poltava Petroleum Company, is 100% subsidiary of JKX Oil and Gas PLC, UK-based. If you look at the production trend, we have 6 fields, good fields, and you can see that our production is slowly falling, still sustainable in current year, in this year, and why this happened? Basically, 40 years of good licenses. It's our fields are brown fields are pretty depleted.
But so, do you get the new ones?
I will come to that in a second. I think this is the priority, and this is echo with what my colleague saying, Olga saying. What we did, we built a new FDP, we field development plan, we start drilling. Thank you to Olga. Thank you to the other members of parliament. Thank you to Roman, who did this real, as we know, broad base for taxation, low rate. But if you have incentive, in this case tax incentive, it's always a good for understanding how the project will go. So new well, with the result, we performed 4 workovers on our wells, and we started to look at our licenses, as I mentioned, in brownfield. We find out that we have dozens of wells on our licenses that were not belong to us. It's a state-owned Naftogaz, UGV subsidiary. It's Ukernafta and Nadra. So we negotiated with them, and we get an access to that. So basically, what's happened next, we received 30% of our production going through from that wells, and I think this is a pretty good result with sustainable production, what we are looking for. Saying that there are additional very good ideas how we can develop our cooperation with the state-owned companies. I'm thankful to the new management of UGV, of Naftogaz, of Nadra and Ukernafta, that they were not afraid to sign those agreements and production enhancement agreements. And it was tough for them to decide, because the production gas is not on their balance, it's on our balance. So what's they receiving? They're receiving just the fee, and it's not modest, it's a good fee. We're paying to them. They're receiving the cash. What we're receiving the production and the money. What the government receiving, tax office receiving the revenues and royalties. And the most importantly, Ukraine receiving domestically produced gas. So it's a win-win situation, and management was brave enough to go and to do the deal, not just for us. If you can go to UGV site right now, you can click on the link, you can download or print the document. It's my understanding 320 wells available on the licenses of a private production company that you can sign it, send to the UGV, receive that access, and do walkovers, sidetracks, use the geological data and the production. So basically what I'm trying to say, I'm finishing right now.
Sure,
I just mentioned about Olga's work and Roman's work. This is the base. Base is right there. Base changes in the fiscal regime and in liberalization, the access to the land. Base is there. So having that, we think next steps very important to have in place. We had that discussion today. Please don't change anything in fiscal regime. Have it stable.
Yeah, don't wait for 10 companies to come and then change it.
Please,
Don't do that.
I was approached by a number of investors for the last 2 days. And if they believe in country and they, I hope, will invest, they want to have a certain rules. Don't change fiscal regime.
Makes sense.
We'll have sustainable one.
So we have...
I'm coming to the most important one. Auctions for new licenses. Having 6 out of 5 brownfields, new licenses is a key issue for us. Our board, JKX board, believes in Ukraine. We have presence in different countries, but believes in Ukraine. And but the most important, what Andriy mentioned before, transparent rules. Anybody can come and participate. In past, actually, 2012 and 2013, we participated and we lost to the DTEC. So these auctions is a key issue to bring the investment. Second one, openness on the geological information, cooperation with state companies, I mentioned about that. And I have a dream too. And their dream is to increase private sector, small, medium, major, in Ukraine.
Which is next gets to the question, key question, existential for Ukraine and for Ukrainian oil, specifically gas sector. So imagine like we have here the audience, which some of these people are thinking or planning to invest in Ukrainian gas production. Some of them work for the people who are planning to invest in production. So why they should do it? I mean, there's many countries in the world which produce oil and gas. So like Middle East, Africa, etc. Why they should focus to Ukraine suddenly and and say, okay, we're not putting money here, we're putting money there. Well, I mean, you sound like a bit. I mean, you sounding optimistic. So, but why somebody else should come?
I'm a Ukrainian citizen. I'm bullish on oil and gas sector in Ukraine. I believe in that. Why? So far, we are losing to the Brazil, Mexico. Our chief of board of directors, Norwegian. We are losing to Norwegian as well. But marketplace is there. Gas prices for last 4 years, they're premium to the European hubs. So there are consumers. Yeah,
so there's better returns?
Yeah, EBITDA margin more than 50%. I think it's a pretty good model.
Can you please say this again? What is your EBITDA? No, you're a public company. So, but it's kind of sounds a bit, more than normally what people expect. So, like
I would say, carefully planned and good projects. Overall, oil and gas sector. It's easy to say that it's more than 50. If it's properly managed, it's more than 50 EBITDA margin. So it's right there. Marketplace.
Okay.
Marketplace is there. Professionals are there. Reserves, resources are there. If we'll, and I met a couple days ago the chief of State Geological Service together with the chiefs of the departments. It seems that they're very serious on preparing geological data, revealing the data. We are cooperating with them, and we will support open auctions for everybody. So I hope small companies, small upstream companies, investment will come, and medium size as well.
Well, thank you very much. Let's get to Roman. Roman, can you say how many people you see coming to the generally to the market? How many new investors? Do you see any movement? Or you see anything else? Just tell us about your experiences with the companies.
Hello everyone. So my name is Roman Opimakh. I run the Association of Gas Producers of Ukraine. This entity, the association, brings together 8 leading private as well as state-owned companies. Altogether, they produce over 90% of Ukrainian gas output. So in my presentation, I would like to walk you through through the main achievements which happened on the market and trying to answer on your questions and what about previous questions about why the foreign investors should decide to come in Ukraine, right? And again, and a little bit describe in details what was previously said by my colleagues. So Ukraine natural gas occupies a significant part of energy mix of Ukraine and consists 1/3 of Ukrainian energy consumption. So Ukraine is among major gas producing companies in Europe with annual output of 20 billion cubic meters. It's over 700 billion cubic feet per year. Besides that, Ukraine remains heavily dependent on imported gas. Last year, imports accounted for 36% of total domestic needs. And the Ukrainian government will use the extension of domestic gas production as the strategic priority in reducing this dependency, import dependency, as well as enhancing the energy, the supply, the security of supply. Basically, three main factors support the belief that Ukraine could boost the domestic gas production in the relatively short term. So one of them, the first factor, is the substantial reserve base. Ukraine has the experience, as you may see, Ukraine has the experience of gas production for over 100 years. 18 years, excuse me. The reserves to production ratio is over than 45 years compared to 12 years on average in Europe. Ukraine is among the three top European countries in terms of the reserve base. The second factor is attractive prices. So import parity prices traditionally secures the favorable netback for indigenous domestic gas producers. And since 2015, prices in Ukraine has been driven by liquid benchmark prices in Europe as NCG, German hub NCG prices. So, and the third factor is a well-developed gas transmission system with surplus capacity. It is used both for the distribution of gas, domestic distribution of gas, as well as was mentioned for the transit of Russian gas to Europe. And such infrastructure allow rapid commercialization of any new petroleum discoveries. So the more on top of that, Ukraine has the largest rig fleet in Europe, which drilled 120 wells last year, and it's planned to drill 160 wells present year. Moreover, a qualified workforce, a wide range of oil field services companies, pretty well-developed supply chain of key domestic manufactured goods, as tubes and cement, is also contribute to the potential for raising the domestic production of gas. So the main point is that you don't need to start everything from scratch. Despite of that, to unlock completely this promising potential, it is important that the production of Ukrainian natural gas will bring more significant investment and considerable technology. That's why, in addition to E&P efforts, exploration and production efforts of domestic Ukrainian companies, it is important that the foreign energy companies will come in upstream sector of Ukraine also. And whenever they consider investing in a country, usually the foreign energy companies take into consideration two types of risk: the below ground risk and above ground risk. So the below ground risk has to do with the geography. So the amount of reserves, the complexity of extraction, and so on. And the above ground risk has to do with the behavior, with the practices of host government. So I would like to focus on above ground risk today. So basically, in this regards, three issues matter for any investors: fiscal regime, regulatory policy, and the rule of access to the reserves. So let's look on it more closer.
We don't have time.
Just I will
quickly.
be very
Yeah,
briefly.
please.
Yeah. Talking about taxation, I think it will be interesting for potential investors. That's why I'll just give a little bit detail. Of course, I show the presentation later. Okay, just talking about taxation. The incentive fiscal regime was introduced last year. It's for new onshore gas wells, which started to drill 2018. Currently, gas production for such a well is subject to 6 and 12% of royalty. Moreover, which is important, the government guarantees the stability of this fiscal regime for such rates by introducing the 5-year stabilization clause. On top of that, currently 5% of paid royalty is allocated to the local communities' development, which should motivate and encourage the countryside and the local communities to cooperate more closer to the with the industry. And these tax changes have tremendously improved the investment attractiveness of Ukraine internationally, vis-a-vis another producing, as you may see, vis-a-vis another producing energy countries. So as for the regulatory regime, so the outdated and prescriptive permitting regime was drastically changed by signing so-called deregulation law, which cut the government red tape and advanced ENP regulation drastically. So due to that, the time between the land allotment and the pilot production can be as short as 1.5 years. Eventually, Eventually, the third issue is the access to the reserves, and recently the Parliament approved the law to introduce the international standards of transparency, EATL law, which was mentioned. We really appreciate the government and support such idea, such initiative, and the government adjusts the rule of access to the reserve through the introduction of online auction or, pretty known public procurement electronic system, ProZorro, as well as facilitates the access to the geological data. Mm-hmm. And currently, Ukraine is working to conduct the international licensing rounds through auction and production sharing agreements. Tenders over 40 promising blocks on acreage on average more than 20,000 billion cubic meters is supposed to be awarded. And indeed, licensing round is the next important logical step which should be performed by the government. It's a real, that's a right path to, break down the barrier and to bring the new investors into the industry.
Okay.
And
that's a lot.
So,
I mean, that's a lot to process.
Sorry,
Thank you very much. So makes sense, but sounds very optimistic. Now let's do some reality check. Here we have a person who's been on Viktor is obviously mentioned certain issues. They've been in a business for I don't know how many decades. 25 years, yes, so quarter a century. In Ukraine, yes, specifically. So now, what about you, Alastair? So tell us about your experiences, and are you planning to participate in all that further?
Okay, let's go back. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that generous introduction. And in some ways, speaking last, it's a bit of a disadvantage because most people have said everything already. But actually, I have one or two different things to say. Andriy talked about unbundling, all good stuff. And I'm very glad that Olga is proud to be sitting with us. We're very proud to have her on our side, and she's done tremendous work for the industry. Thank you, Olga. Viktor doesn't want the fiscal regime to change, and I think stability is very important. I'm not sure we've quite got the right formula myself yet, but it's a step in the right direction. And Roman is a great ambassador for the business. But one thing I want to talk about is people have talked, and in fact, there was mention earlier about the reserves production ratio. And everybody agrees that Ukraine has a fantastic amount of reserves. This in itself is a little troubling, because the reality of what's happened in Ukraine is, you look at this chart here, that the red is consumption and the blue is production. Production's stayed more or less the same at about 20 BCM for over the last 10 years or so. Consumption's gone down. Now, I think everybody agrees that a very important imperative is that Ukraine should become self-sufficient. And self-sufficient in energy, self-sufficient in gas. And a very good way of doing that, of course, is energy conservation. Nobody seems to talk very much about that in these type of forums, but there's too much gas being wasted. In the old days, there's huge amounts being wasted on non-economic industries based on free gas. That's stopped, but there's more that can be done. But if we talk about reserves, okay, there's these reserves. Remember, there's a very tight definition of what reserves are. That is gas which has already been discovered, and all you need to do is turn the tap on. Where is it? Well, in this chart, I'm showing where it is. And it appears to be mainly in the hands of state companies. So do the state companies, I mean, in some ways I'm rather, well, in every way I'm very disappointed that Andriy isn't here to participate in this. Is it the state companies that just need to turn on the taps? I don't think so. I think what we're talking about here is that the picture on reserves has been systematically distorted over many years. One factor is that under the Soviet system, I'm getting a bit technical here, but the recovery factor, which is the degree to which gas can be produced, was theoretical and not based on economics, so it tended to be overstated. And then there are other reasons why the state balance reserves tend to be overstated. So I don't think the reserves production ratio is so enormous. I don't think it's just a question of turning on the taps. I think that what's required is that companies need to go out there and they need to explore. And exploration is risky business. That's more cost and more risk. Oh, sorry, I'll try and move on. So there's exploration means a high chance of completely losing your investment. The golden rule of exploration, ladies and gentlemen, is try to do it with somebody else's money. Now, we need companies to come in. We need to persuade people through the good offices of people like Roman to come to Ukraine. It's not an easy task to persuade people to come into Ukraine. To persuade people to come into Ukraine and take the exploration risk, that's doubling up on the risk. So it's a really tough ask to do. And I will just make one point in this area, which is other people have talked about other things, but there's a legal issue here, and that is the nature of the contracts. And contracts in Ukraine at the moment are subject to inspection through a system which has its legacies from the Soviet days. Let me give you an example of this. We have geological inspections of our licenses. And in geological licenses, the inspectors apply 50 or so criteria. One of the criteria, for example, can be, have you taken enough sample cores in the wells that you've drilled? Another is, do they think that your knowledge of geology is sufficient? And a number of these tests are entirely subjective. Now, these guys also have a very big stick. They have the right to order the suspension or even termination of your licenses. And this is a catastrophic thing. If you're producing gas and you have to suspend your production, it means that you could lose, and that's not you, it means Ukraine could lose the production of that well forever. The solution, there is a solution. That is that those kind of remedies need to be applied objectively and according to law, and not just by resolutions that can be changed. So we've talked about auctions. I won't talk about access to land, ecological, fiscal terms. What we really need is a new subsoil code. And I'm aware that the EU is putting money into this new subsoil code. And I think what's really needed is that Ukraine needs to show it's internationally competitive, stable, fair, and a new subsoil code is needed, which is modern, based on it, best international practices, and should replace all existing law. And it needs a champion on the Ukrainian side to push this through. So plenty of colleagues here who I'm sure will be ready to take this on.
That's very good. Thank you. Very informative. So may I ask you one thing? So why do you think still the companies have to come? So and invest in Ukrainian gas production, like now, like yeah. So why are we doing this? Obviously, there is a something attractive. What do you think the most attractive thing for the investors to invest right now? Assuming all of these changes in the legislation are still continued, and Olga and Roman doing such a great work, and etc. But still,
when we invested in Ukraine in 2011, we foresaw two possible outcomes. One outcome was that Ukraine would continue to be a satellite state of Russia, in which case that would be an okay outcome, but not a great one. But we were very excited by the thought of actually being a gas producer in an EU country. If you try to buy gas production in an EU country, you only get a small discount on the expected future net revenue. I think there are exciting opportunities in terms of valuation today of potential, of Ukrainian potential, but it does require risk-taking. You need a new generation of buccaneering, new entrepreneurial people. I think those who dare may win.
fantastic. So let's take two questions from the. Yeah, please. Go
I
ahead.
just
Your
feel
question.
like
Yeah.
I'm obliged to advocate
comment.
for Ukraine. Kind of, I agree to everything, you know, which I heard today, which is a surprise because usually we argue a little bit.
Yeah, it's a
But
surprisingly,
finally
yeah.
we made peace and we agree, and this is
Peaceful
all
panel.
good. If you look at Alastair's wishes for stable, predictable, everything, you know, kind of boring, Switzerland is the case, except there is no gas there. So this is my answer to, you know, this very pragmatic question, why Ukraine? Because we just happen to have these, you know, resources and reserves. And this is not a wonderland. I'm not promising you easy life in Ukraine. But it is somehow predictable, by now orderly. You know, we did what was like first aid kit, you know, when you do like remove most of like urgent pain, it's workable. You know, numbers are very attractive, you know, as attractive as renewables, because after we passed all the laws, I have like 5 business meetings in a day. Half of them are renewables, but thankfully now I also have realistic interest from oil and gas people coming and asking me, Olga, when is auctions? When is the next auction? So now I put my political pressure not on Andriy, not on these guys, but now on State Geological Service and Prime Minister encouraging them.
So you see investors coming, right?
I actually see investors coming.
And are these like local, international?
No,
from here,
international. As I mentioned, there are some projects. I think a realistic, you know, analysis on our side is like we don't have appropriate equipment, we don't have appropriate technology and people to do the Black Sea projects. This is reality,
yeah, that's
and you know everybody
tough.
will agree. We don't have enough of appetite for risk-taking within the local investors for big projects. You know, big in terms of Ukraine, but doable in terms of mid-range companies from Europe, Canada. I meet with Canadians, I meet with service companies. Usually politicians don't do it, but I do it to understand what is their technical issues which are preventing them. To give you a case, I'm talking to Canadian people who cannot open bank account in Canada to deal with UGV right now. So me, ambassador, we are all involved trying to understand, is it like just by chance because somebody in Canadian bank doesn't understand that Ukraine is not under sanction list, but Crimea and some of the Crimean companies are. And this is the type of work I do, you know, along with Yulia, who is also having her meetings. So this is to say, we know it's not ideal, but it's doable.
Okay.
Agree.
So who raises the first? Okay, please. And then the second. Yes, Brian, you will definitely will give you a chance. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the interesting comments, everybody. I would like to pick up on what the lady there discussed about the potentials of renewables. I did a PhD and a postdoctorate in Oxford University on the potentials of gas export from the Middle East to East Asia. It's published by Oxford University Press as a book, and it was written under auspices of Professor Jonathan Stern from Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, which I'm sure whoever that has been involved in Ukraine in the gas sector knows him very well. He's a big advocate of the Ukrainian gas everywhere. Gas is good. I was basically working on gas for quite some time in the Middle East as a consultant to a lot of Middle Eastern national oil companies. But believe me, now it's the time to rethink that maybe gas is not the best just to burn it, to cook, or to light up a house. It's a blessing for Ukraine that you just happen to have the gas. I agree with you on that. But is it the best way just to burn it for these purposes? Or you can really turn it into some value-added type of commodities and products and create jobs, it creates hard currencies where you could just tap into free, abandoned, for example, solar or wind potential throughout this huge country of yours. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll have a renewable panel shortly. So, but for I understand your question would be like, how do you turn the gas to the liquid commodity in? All right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Do you? What wasn't? It wasn't a question.
Yeah, I serve on a committee which is dealing with renewables, so I can talk forever about renewables, but just let's be realistic. The gas is used in my country for heating. Can you replace the centralized heating in my country with renewables? We have 1.3% of renewables in electricity generation. As of now, it costs my country 8.3% of overall revenues for the market. 56% of electricity, just electricity, is being produced by Energoatom, which is nuclear stations. 30% is coal-empowered stations. I mean, I have lots of dreams, but as a politician, I have to give realistic promises. Renewables are great. Gas will remain important for the next 20 years. Okay. In terms of transit, in terms of heating, in terms of consumption, in terms of my industry, and moreover, I do want my country to benefit just like Norway from selling gas to Europe and be rich the way they are. So that's my vision.
That's
for
very
gas.
good. Very. So
I moved to the microphone. Thanks for giving me the microphone. Brian Bonner from the Kyiv Post, Ukraine's English language newspaper. I am, as people who know me, I'm a tremendous optimist about Ukraine. But there are some statistics that challenge my optimism. One is the production of natural gas, 20 billion cubic meters since 1992. It hasn't budged. Is one of the reasons it hasn't budged is because 25% of the permits for oil and gas exploration are in the hands of people like Mykola Zlochevsky, Viktor Pinchuk, Igor Kolomoisky, Rinat Akhmetov. That's one question. The second question is, I see, this optimism about the gas transit system and privatizing it or having somebody else run it. But it's hard for me to see how the gas transit system has any value after Nord Stream 2 goes fully online. Again, I could be wrong, so please tell me where I made the mistake.
Well, Roman, probably you would be the best person about diversification of the investors kind of part.
Yeah, about the first part of your question. So let me say that in terms of the private producers, the share of private producers in gross production raised in more than 10 times, actually, during the last 10 years. 10 times during the last 10 years.
Private production.
Exactly.
But it's only 10%.
But you shoot the names, right? I give you the answer. Right. And back to the next part of the producers, so the state-owned companies. it was a huge problem because there was unfunded. It was two-tier system, like $20 per 1,000 cubic meters when the market price was 400. So right now the situation is changed drastically. They have funds, they change the market, they buy a lot of producers, they make a frac, they bring the new rigs, they pay for the outsource. So of course, you know how much time you need to drill the rig in Ukraine, which Andriy knows very well. So it's like 6 months. I mean, relatively, it could be more because the depth depends on the depth. The depth could be deeper than 6 kilometers. So the change just came at the start of this year. So it's capital extensive industry and long lasting. So you need to wait a little bit, just give it time.
Thank you. Alastair, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I mean, the other part of this is going back to what I was saying about reserves and resources and exploration. The issue is that the oil and gas business is a long-term business, and Roman, you alluded to that, but I would say the time horizon is even longer, that you need to have the right system, the right incentives in place, and get people confident that it's not going to change over many years. The life cycle of oil and gas investments is 10 years plus. So if things are done right now, you will see results, maybe not even next year, but perhaps in the years to come. And secondly, on the Nord Stream 2 question, I think it's true that the gas transmission system will be less heavily used, but there'll always be some requirement for the Ukraine transmission system to balance the needs of Europe. And we should not forget that there's no more gas, no additional gas coming from Norway. The Dutch are shutting down their gas production. The only new source of gas into Europe in any quantity is US LNG, and that can come and go with as prices come. So I think there's going to be a big requirement for Russian gas to get into Europe, and Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 will soon not be enough. They'll be talking about Nord Stream 3, or the alternative of using the Ukrainian gas transit system. So I don't think the Ukrainian gas transit system is going to be superfluous in any way. And furthermore, I think if Ukraine does succeed in rejuvenating its oil and gas business, that gas transmission system is going to be used to export, according to Olga's dream, export gas to Europe.
Olga, just please.
Okay, so
Last comment.
I see your point. As you, I want change past of my country, but I cannot. So if you go in each and every country, the oil production is owned by rich people. You know, it's just the way it is in many countries.
Or
but it
institutional
is my
investors.
job to make sure that people in this room will have fair access to compete in the new type of auctions along with those people. It is my job to make sure that whomever owns, be it you or those people you mentioned, they pay fair amount of taxes as they are supposed to. And it is my job to fight fiercely against Nord Stream 2 because it is destroying my country and it is ruining its future. On this one, we agree with you. But I think it's understood by politicians in my country which risks it is bringing. But on the first two issues, I agree, you know, this is not the way we want, but that's why we discuss how to change it for better.
Thank you. One, I would like, before we wrap up, I would like to make 3 comments from myself. So first of all, I'm in this business for 40 years, 41, since I'm 41, because I grew up on the oil fields. And I'm a 3rd generation oil producer, grew up on the rigs, literally. I have to tell you that never ever this market was so active as it is right now, and so dynamic, and so you know, companies coming, new service companies coming, opening offices, etc. Yes, we have situation with the war when majors left, but we do see lots of infrastructural and strategic framework things which never been ever in this country before, and no one was even thinking about that before. So progress is definitely here, so I would like to obviously ask our producers to keep on, and definitely the media and independent to require more diversification of the investors. They have to come, so we have to have a very kind of broad and very diversified portfolio of investors. Then the country would be, then the lobbyists of the, of the production companies would be, properly and equally participating in the legislation work, and things will be even better than, getting better even than they are right now. So one thing I wanted to say is that obviously we have to be responsible people. As you know, the UN United Climate Change Commission published a report a couple of days ago. Terrible prospects if we don't switch to renewables, much more aggressive than we are right now, like way more. And though we are in the fossil fuels business, we have to think about the next generation. So please do renewables. Invest in renewables, and don't think it's somebody else's business. It's all our future of our country, planet, generations to come, etc. It's just personal. And obviously, thank you very much for participation. And thank you, BCC. Actually, BCC, British Ukrainian Chamber. That's a very good door to Ukraine. The guys been doing an excellent job for this conference. So fantastic people, come to them. And thank you very much, our panelists.